Welcome to the My Tennis Coaching Podcast, your go-to resource for all things tennis coaching. Stay tuned for insightful discussions and practical tips that will make a real difference on and off the court.
What is learning? How do we know our players are actually learning? Why did I spend 20 years trying to teach players in a way that wasn't very effective for them to learn? And what have I found over the past 4 to 5 years through my research and my practitioner way of delivering ecological psychology? They're just some of the questions we're going to unpack today in the My Tennis Coaching Podcast. First and foremost, apologies. This is the second time I have recorded this podcast. The first time I streamed live on YouTube this morning, but the audio was absolutely horrendous. So huge apologies if you joined in. And it's really frustrating because there was quite a lot of viewership on that podcast and we had a couple of good questions as well. But when I've gone back to upload it into Spotify, I've realized that the audio is pretty poor. So apologies. So I'm just re-recording this. We're not streaming live. I'm going to re-record it and then put it out on a live stream later on, just so the audio is a little bit better. But we're still going to unpack those questions that I started with, and we're going to look at learning. Why for 20 years I completely got it wrong as a coach. And I was trying to teach players and allow them to learn in a way that's not very efficient and effective. So we're going to kick off and start with the illusion of learning and why we perceive learning to be in a very linear fashion. And we always think back to school and any conversations or challenges I have with coaches, parents, it always goes back to, yeah, but when I learn a foreign language, I do it this way. When I learn how to write, I do it this way, or play a musical instrument, I do it this way. And we have this notion of what learning is. So let's unpack that to start with. So let's go back to the British schooling system and Taylorism. So Taylorism is all about why the British schooling system was set up. The British schooling system was set up to effectively get kids into factories, into workhouses. It was to train them to conform, comply, to carry out mundane tasks, to reduce creativity and decision making, to let them respect authority, to follow out orders. And Taylorism was all about getting the kids ready to work in factories, because the Industrial Revolution and trying to get these kids to comply and conform. So Taylorism was all about an authority figure, a teacher, a coach. They had the knowledge and the expertise. You didn't question what they said. You just followed their orders. You believed everything they said. And you just followed instructions. And they would have the right and wrong way to learn, I don't know, English. And their job was to teach you it. And they'll teach you it through a different couple of ways. Number one, they'll break things down. So the idea was we make something that's really complex, quite simple to complex. So we break down letters, we break down language, break down mathematics. We start small and then we scale it up and make it more complex. And back then we have to understand that a lot of the motor learning and psychology was all about, well, the human body is a machine. And again, you have to think about the Industrial Revolution and the birth of machines. Like the idea was, like, if a machine's broken, you take something out, you fix it, you put it back in. And that's how learning was viewed as well. So these are complex machines, human body. We need to train them. We need to program them a bit like we would think about training a computer or AI system today. So that's a big view of how the human body worked back then. So we'll make things that are quite complicated really simple. A bit like we do in tennis coaching. We make forehands which we perceive as quite complicated. Let's make them simple: contact point, path, angle, speed. Let's just break it down. That's Taylorism. Also, repetition. The more we do it, the more efficient and effective you get. Again, the idea was these kids would go off to work and they work in factories and they'll just do one job. And it's the same job all day, every day. And the more they do it, the more efficient and effective they get. So the idea was to train them to have lots of repetition. So that's why in schools back in the day, I can still remember it now, just reminiscing, you just do the 2 times table over and over again. Repeat, 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 repeat. What we have to understand, that's not almost training you how to do the 2 times table. That's training you to just deal with repetition, to do the same thing over and over again. The idea is you go off and work in the factory. And we see that in coaching, don't we? We see it in coaching. Okay, if I just teach you the forehand over and over again, it becomes autonomous. You'll be able to do it without thinking, a bit like working in a factory. And again, back then with Taylorism, we didn't understand ecological psychology, and we didn't fully understand how the human system works. And I'm going to call it a human system throughout the podcast, because it's not a body and a mind, or a mind controlling the body. It's one organism. It's one complete system. So I'm going to call it the human system, because again, even back then, we believed that the mind, the brain, controlled everything, and it was almost like a little person inside your body controlling it. And that was your conscience, or your spirit, or your soul, whatever you want to call it. But what we understand just about biology is you don't have a mind and body that are separate, because your mind is not physical, and something that's not physical can't control something that is physical. So your mind, body, it's all one complete system. So I'm going to refer to it. But again, back then, we didn't think that way. We thought that the brain controlled everything. And that's where we had information processing and cognitive psychology coming a little bit later on, which again thinks about a top-down controller, the brain, and the brain controls everything. The brain takes in information and then it puts it out into output. And that's the way we learn. And that's the illusion of learning. Now, as I record this podcast in May 2025, modern day psychology and things like ecological psychology challenge that. Because if you think about all the movements you make just today, so today, from I got up at what, 7 a.m., I go to bed at 10 p.m. Think about all the movements, think about all the interactions I'm going to have today, all the different moving parts I have to juggle with, working the computer, working a microphone, working lighting, going on a tennis court, working with players, working with lessons, driving to and from. How can my brain possibly remember all those movements every single day? Because every single movement is slightly unique, which we'll talk about, I'm sure, during this podcast. There's a storage issue there. Like even the most advanced computers of today, quantum computers, could not process that much information. So learning how we used to think, how we were learned in school, from an ecological psychology point of view, is probably not the most efficient, effective way to learn. The human system learns not by being told what to do, not by watching, but by interacting. By interacting with the real world around it in real time. It doesn't pull from memory. We don't store memories like we think we do. We remember certain affordances or opportunities, but we don't store memory, which I'm sure will be a different podcast at some point. So there's a massive illusion of learning. We believe learning is done how we were educated, but we have to remember how we were educated. It was all about getting us to the factory. And you'll see now within a lot of education, modern day education, they're moving away from repetition. They're moving away from compliance and conformity, like uniforms, and all doing the same thing. And you all have to do certain subjects, whereas now you have options. They're moving away from an authority figure who stands at the front and just spews out information and knowledge, or writes it on a white, say, chalkboard. If you're my age, writes it on a chalkboard and you write it down, you repeat it. Because guess what? Psychology is moving on. Human research is moving on. We're starting to understand that this dynamic human system is really complex. It's not a computer. It's a living organism that interacts with the world around it. And surely as tennis coaches, we have to understand that about learning. Like, you can't program a player. And I'm fascinated by, and there's the Wild River Wild podcast. Sorry, I've got that wrong. About horse riding. Like, how could you train a horse that doesn't speak English? Like, you can't interact with a horse like you would a player, but the interaction is still quite key. So how can you train a horse to, one, accept the rider, but then do what the rider wants? Because you both see the world differently. So that's what ecological psychology is all about. It's about how we interact with the world. So sorry to start off with that, but I think it's important that we understand that our bias towards learning is rooted in Taylorism. And Taylorism is all about compliance, conformity, getting kids ready for the workhouses and factories. That's the whole idea of the educational system back in Britain, but then across the world as well. And I'm not an expert in Taylorism, so if there are any experts, it'd be great if you could reach out and sort of maybe bring a bit more context to this as well, or even come onto a future podcast as well. But it's something that I have looked into and researched because, again, I'm in a human movement business. So that's the illusion of learning. So what does learning look like? So we believe that learning is structured, regimented, explicit instructions from an expert coach like myself. And the idea is the player just repeats it. They comply and conform, and they just repeat the action over and over again. Learning's not done that way. Learning is messy. Learning is what we potentially would define as wrong. Learning is making mistakes. So let's use this as an example. So a new player who's learning to serve, never served in their life. How do they learn how to serve? Well, they have to interact with the game. They have to interact with the environment. There's a net, there's a service box, there's lines on the tennis court. They've got a racket, they've got a ball. They have to find out a way of moving their body to get the ball into the box to start the point. You can try and program that player as much as you can. You can give them lots of instructions. You can give them lots of visual demonstrations. And ultimately, the player will throw the ball up and miss. And that's where you're, yeah, okay, yeah, but we just need to do more. The more we do it, the better you'll get. So you get lots of repetition, lots of repetition. What we have to understand is it's not the success that the player learns from, it's the failure. So the player, the human system, they're interacting with the environment in a very messy way. And when they throw the ball up, the body doesn't know how to move. And we'll look at this in next week's podcast with the degrees of freedom. The body doesn't know how to move. And the body can move in an unlimited number of different ways. If you break down each and every single joint and muscle fiber and ligament and tendon, there's an unlimited way the body can move. So the body doesn't know because it's just chaos. The body understands that the ball has to go cross court. So the body's all over the place and the arms are flailing and the body doesn't know how to move efficiently and effectively. That's what we would class as uncoordinated movement. It's not uncoordinated. It's the body doesn't know how to move to achieve the task in the most efficient and effective way. So the body will start to sort of freeze those degrees of freedom. That's why you see players move like robots, which we'll unpack a lot in next week's podcast. But then the player needs to calibrate how to hit the ball. So they'll hit the ball out, hit the ball in the net, hit the ball wide. And what's happening there is the body's trying to find the solution. It's messy, it's chaotic, and there's loads of errors and mistakes. And what does the coach do? The coach jumps in. The coach jumps in and tries to stop and rescue. So despite that learning's taking place, the coach jumps in and they halt and they stop the learning. And they then will give a prescribed model, Taylorism. They'll show a demonstration, Taylorism. And they'll get the player to repeat the perfect model over and over again, repetition, Taylorism. They'll go back to that old model or traditional model of learning. Oh, that's how we learn. What's happening is actual human system learning, and they're stopping it. And they're going in as coaches. And I did this for 20 years. You go in and you try and program the machine. You don't look at the human, you look at it as a machine. And that's what learning really is. Learning is messy, it's chaotic. But because we have this bias towards traditional learning, where everything is silent in the classroom, everyone listens, everyone does what they're told, everyone complies and conforms, that's what we perceive learning as. So when you see one of my lessons now, and it's chaos, and there's double bounces, and there's double touches, and there's loads of errors, loads of mistakes, and I'm sat there, but I'm stood there with a smile on my face, enjoying it. It makes everyone really uncomfortable. But learning is uncomfortable. To get better at something, you have to be destabilized. When I go to gym after this recording, I will try and destabilize my body by lifting heavier weights than I did yesterday. I am trying to destabilize what I've already got to make improvements. To be destabilized is going to make me feel uncomfortable. Learning is uncomfortable because you haven't got a solution yet. And you will feel uncomfortable and it will look uncomfortable. And not only you as a player, but the parents will look uncomfortable. The coach will definitely look uncomfortable. But that's what learning is. Learning is that space between balance and unbalanced, stability and unstable, comfortable and uncomfortable. We want you to be uncomfortable to learn. And it's mad because we then look at the trap of performance look in practice. Coaches don't like being uncomfortable. Coaches like being comfortable because if it's uncomfortable, they're worried that the parents are going to question them. Why aren't you teaching my player the right technique? Why are they making so many mistakes? Why am I wasting my money? So therefore, what happens? The coach will then comply and conform to the parent. They will do the basket feeding. They will do the explicit instructions. They will do the demonstrations because they feel the peer pressure from the parents. Even though it's no use to the player and there's very little value to the player, they'll do those things because of peer pressure. They'll conform and comply to that traditional bias of learning, even though it's very little value to the player. Because again, the human system doesn't learn by listening. The human system doesn't learn by watching, really. It learns through interaction. And like with perception is what we see, hear, and feel. But that's all together linked in. Again, the whole idea of ways of learning, the auditory, visual, kinesthetic, and each person has a preference to each one. Absolute baloney. No actual science in that whatsoever, but still coached in coach education. Oh, he's an auditory learner there of kinesthetic. It's rubbish. Your perception is those three things coupled together. That's how we learn, those three things: perception, action. But coaches comply because of the peer pressure from parents. They'll comply because of peer pressure from national governing bodies who have a model-based idea of how a player should look and play at a certain age. And long-term player development was it really harmed tennis because we had this idea of, well, that's a fundamental stage. That's learning to train, learn to compete. Therefore, we teach the player these things where now you just teach everything all at once. The game's the game. It just scales a little bit differently, which I'm sure we'll touch upon in this podcast. But that's the trap. And when we think about traditional coaching, and I say traditional because that's what the science calls it, the ecological dynamics, ecological psychology is a contemporary, new, ever emerging philosophy and methodology. So I'm looking at traditional methods. If we believe in that traditional way of Taylorism, breaking things down, high repetition, a authority figure, that's why we see basket feeding. So basket feeding is a great example of Taylorism. Well, your forehand's breaking down. So we're going to take a little piece out, like the contact point. We're going to isolate it in a basket drill. We're going to block or mass feed it. We're going to make it better. And then we're going to put it back into the system. Again, that's the whole idea and the bias of Taylorism. Okay, I can take something out, fix it, put it back in. The problem is, again, we're not machines. So when you isolate the forehand and you basket feed it 100 times, the first 4 to 5 will be ropey because the system is trying to find the solution to what's in front of it. By forehand 97, 98, 99, 100, the system gets really good. Why? Because, yeah, of course, we learn through repetition. We learn by interaction. So the human system's interacting with the basket drill. So it gets better really quick. So now we have the model of performance look in practice. It looks like it's working. It almost looks like we're turning water into wine within a very short space of time. And there's a famous coach in the south of France called Patrick who does this all the time on Instagram. 30-second clip of him just turning water into wine. But that learning is built on really shaky ground because the system, the player, they're getting good at that forehand only in that very unique situation. In a tennis match, that shot will never come because I guarantee that ball's not going to come from the same angle, from the same position, with the same speed and spin ever. every 2 forehands you hit in your life will never, sorry, every forehand you hit in your life is different. The environment, the task, you're different every single shot. There's always a different perspective. If I hit one shot standing still and I move one step to my right, everything changes. Only slightly, but everything changes. But by basket feeding, we can make it look really good. And it looks like learning's taking place. And then if I start shouting lots of great technical phrases, it looks like I know what I'm talking about. And the player looks like they're getting better. And it looks intense. And it's this illusion of learning. But what happens when you put the player into a match? What happens when you put the player in a dynamic and chaotic situation? Oh, that forehand disappears. Oh, it's like what happened? And that's what always confused me as a coach. Like I'd spend hours repeating the forehand with a player, put him in a match or her in a match, it disappears because they haven't learned anything. They've not learned how to hit a forehand. Well, they have, but they've learned to hit a forehand in a very specific way, in a very specific situation. And yes, I could give some variability in my feeding, but it doesn't make a big difference. We need a high level of variability. We don't need less variability. We need a high level of variability. And what happens is we get dragged into this performance. And I said a few weeks back on LinkedIn, like performance coaching is not generally a performance of the player, it's performance of the coach. Oh, I've worked with top 50 players in the world. I must know how learning's done. No. Oh, I've been top 10 in the world. I know how to make it. No, you don't, because you don't understand how humans learn. And that's what I've been doing over the past 5-6 years, is understanding how the human system learns, how it learns movement, how it interacts with the world, because that's what tennis is. Tennis is an interaction. Tennis is a dynamic and chaotic game. And for me as a coach, I need to understand that. And for 20 years, I put trust in how I was educated as a person through schooling, as a coach through coach education. And only when you start looking at ecological psychology and other potential ways of coaching that you think, oh, hang on, that actually makes no sense, because we're not machines, we're not robots. We're actually human beings who are creative and who make decisions, and things like pressure gets to us. Like a robot doesn't feel pressure, but then we try and teach a human being to feel pressure, but they have no fear, and it doesn't make any sense. But then it goes back to sort of how we will learn, and that's the problem, because some coaches have built reputations on creating the illusion, and I generally say some of the worst coaches are the best magicians, because they create this illusion of they know what they're doing. And sometimes the player gets really good despite the coaching. And then, and that's where we have then survivorship bias. Oh, yeah, that player's made it, so therefore it must be the coach. But then when you watch the coaching methods, it goes against how the human system learns. So you think, well, definitely wasn't the coaching. Pretty sure the players made it despite the coaching. And I made a comment the other day with someone online, and they said, well, I got to such level and I did it that way. I said, well, imagine if you would have done it the other way, you might have even been better. And they sort of just give me a load of skull comments back. So I think we've got to be careful with the illusion of performance and the trap. Like, if it looks good, it's probably not learning. It goes back to being stable and unstable. If I'm stable, I'm not learning. I'm comfortable. My body doesn't need to adapt. So learning occurs when it's unstable, because it has to adapt. It has to do new things. And that's where representative learning design comes in. So as an ecological coach, as an ecological psychology, ecological dynamics practitioner, my job is to make you uncomfortable. I don't want you to be balanced. I don't want you to be comfortable. I want you to be uncomfortable. And that's where learning's done. And I was saying this to a teenage group of players this week. Like, if you're not uncomfortable, you're not learning. If you're comfortable and everything's just nice and easy, you're not learning. You're just maintaining. Your body's just stable. At this point, we've got to make you unstable. And through representative learning design, I'm constantly manipulating the environment or the task or the player, because I want them to constantly adapt. So within my sessions, It looks like there's loads of mistakes. It looks like there's loads of errors. It also looks like I'm not fixing errors. I'm not fixing technique. I'm not fixing players. And I'm just allowing players to miss because I am. Because that's how the human system prefers to learn. And at the moment, I've got a 1-year-old boy. Well, he's 1 next week. And it's fascinating watching how he interacts with the world. And every single day he's growing, he's getting stronger. Therefore, he's got more opportunities to take action. And he's learning lots of new things. No one's telling him how to do things. No one's showing him how to move. Like, we bought him a little bubble car, and he's learned how to climb in and out the car safely himself, how to bend his knee and pull himself up and then swivel around and put his legs down and climb out. No one's told him that. He's learned it through interaction. He's learned it through not being able to get up and then realizing that he can bend his knees and get up. And we have this misconception that we need to teach players how to learn how to play the game. It goes back to being uncomfortable though as well, because let's say we've got 2 beginners, never played tennis in their life, never even seen a tennis match, never seen a tennis court, never seen a tennis racket. Surely they couldn't just play the game, right? That's the assumption we make as coaches. And that's a big pushback I get from a lot of people. You have to show beginners first. Beginners can't just play the game. That's just witchcraft. That's just nuts, Steve. You're crazy. But what we fail to realize is, yes, they can. Because first and foremost, what did players do before tennis coaches? I'm pretty sure they just played. When tennis was invented, the first ever game of tennis, how did they know what to do without anyone showing them? Pretty sure they just played. So let's just think about it from a human system point of view. So you go to a tennis court, straight away you see a net. So the net is what we call an affordance. An affordance is an opportunity for action or behavior. So the net doesn't afford you to go through it, because if you hit the ball at the net, it stops. So you can't go through the net. Therefore, it invites you to go over. So straight away, I know tennis is not about hitting the ball in the net like football, because there's the other half of the court and there's nets in the middle. So without even me knowing it's called a net, I know that I can't go through it. I can go over it. On the other side of the net, there's lines. Lines generally represent boundaries. Okay, so that's interesting. So I'm probably have to keep the ball inside the lines. I don't have to hit the ball past the lines. And you think about kids who play computer games. A lot of kids' computer games now don't have any instruction manuals. They don't have a way to play. It's what we call a sandbox. You just play. And then the player, kid, interacts with the computer world and finds a way of doing it. Minecraft's a great example. Like, you just play it and you work it out and you discover it yourself. Humans are really good at that. We've been doing it since the beginning of time. We've been used to interacting with stuff and realizing what's healthy and what's not so healthy. So straight away, I know I can't go through the net. I've got to go over it. The invitation's to go over. The lines are inviting me to stay inside. Okay, so now I've got a racket as well. So there's a racket on the floor that I've never picked up in my life. But I look at the racket and it's shaped in a weird way. There's like a handle at the bottom. I don't even know it's called a handle, but there's a really thin bit at the bottom. At the top, it's like a big sort of oval shape with strings. Well, if I grab it by the racket head, it doesn't feel very comfortable with my hands. But if I grab the handle, okay, that makes more sense, because that's where my hands must go, because the racket is inviting me to hold it on the handle because it's been designed for hands. And then the racket head with strings in it. Oh, that looks like it can move and hit something. Oh, there's a ball there. Okay, so the ball's round. So the ball's going to bounce. So tennis must be a game of the bouncing ball, right? So I've got a racket, I've got a net, I've got lines, so I can hit the ball over the net. So without anyone showing me, the environment has already shaped the game to me. I know how to play. I know how to hold a racket because the racket affords me to hold it and handle. The racket head affords me to hit a ball. I've got the ball that bounces. I know it has to go over the net and into the lines. Don't need any knowledge. Don't need anyone telling me that whatsoever. Don't even need to see it on TV or Wimbledon. I can just do it straight away. The environment has given me all the information I need. And now me and my friend can play. And we can hit the ball over the net inside the lines without anyone ever telling us. And we may discover that, okay, we can actually hit up here, or we can hit down, we can go above the head, below the head. Okay, so there's different ways. Okay, hit the ball with no bounce. Okay, great. We actually learn how to play the game without any coaching whatsoever. And I think I'm quite strong on this because that's how I learned how to play tennis. No one told me how to play tennis. I just played. I just worked it out myself. Now, people might push back on me there and go, yeah, but so you're saying we don't need coaching? No, we need coaching, because what a coach can do is draw your attention to really good information. Like, have you realized when you're standing so far up the court that the court got smaller? So therefore, you've got to hit the ball differently. If you're up the court, the invitation there is to not let the ball bounce. But when you're way back behind the baseline, it's quite difficult to hit the ball without a bounce, because it's probably going to bounce before you. And if you don't let it bounce, it's probably going to land out. So our job as coaches is not to tell the players how to play the game, but draw their attention to information that's going to help them play the game better. But it's not explicitly telling them, because again, I don't know, pardon me, what information that the player can see and is it relevant to them. I'm allowing them to explore it in lots of different ways. So with representative learning design, that's what I do as a coach. I create an environment for them to explore. We don't need a lot of knowledge to play the game of tennis. So players can learn the game by playing the game. But coach's job, my job, is to bring attention to really relevant information. And we'll look at this a little bit more next week in the podcast with the beginners. And why do beginners go like a robot and stiffen everything up? Okay, there's a reason for that. There's a very human system reason for that. And our job as coaches is to break that, not break it down, but to unfreeze it. And we'll talk about that next week. It's called the Degrees of Freedom. So make sure you tune in next Friday at 10:30. So when you get these two beginners and they're learning, again, there's no coach involved at this point. Then they're learning. What you'll see is you'll see the players hit the ball out. They'll hit the ball long. Out. My point. 1-0. 15 love. If they generally know a score, probably call it 1-0. So the player knows straight away that they hit the ball outside the lines, they lose. So therefore, they'll start hitting the ball and try and keep it inside the lines. Oh, the players just worked out that if they hit the ball away from their opponent, they miss and then they win. Okay. And then what you start to see is the human system exploring different things to see different causalities, different cause and effect. And you'll see frustration. You'll see lots of mistakes. You'll see problem solving, decision making, self-talk. You'll see this chaos in front of you. That's the human system learning and adapting in real time based on the information in front of it. And that's where the chaos comes in. And that's what, again, makes coaches and parents and players uncomfortable, because it's chaos. And we don't think chaos is learning. We understand this bias again of Taylorism. Learning is regimented. Learning is structured. It's explicit instructions from an expert. It's information given, processed, and then outputted. But hopefully after 34 minutes of me rabbiting on here, you understand, well, that's not how the human system works. The human system interacts, doesn't really get programmed. And we need repetition, but we don't need repetition with repetition. We need plenty of practice, but understand we need to do it in lots of different ways. So go back to the forehand example of the two beginners. So the beginner doesn't need consistency of doing the same thing over and over again. The beginner needs to get the ball over and in, but in multiple different ways. So they have to have the same outcome, get the ball in, but they have to do it in lots of different ways. Can you do it from behind the baseline? Can you do it from the orange baseline? Can you do it from the middle of the court? Can you do it with a no bounce, with a bounce? Can you do it with a high swing, low swing, fast swing, slow swing? It has to be completely adaptable. That's what repetition with repetition is. It's that ability to mix it up and change it. We don't get that in a sterile Taylorism traditional way of coaching. It's just, this is a way, and we'll repeat it over and over again. So when we see learning, it's messy and it's chaotic, we want to jump in, we want to rescue. because the coach will feel a bit of peer pressure from the parents or the head coach of, oh my God, this looks awful. I've got to go in and rescue. And by going in and rescuing, you stop learning. You make it worse. You actually deny the kids learning opportunities. And parents just as guilty as well. So when players feel a little bit uncomfortable and it's a little bit challenging, parents want to jump in and rescue. Oh, he's tired today. Oh, he didn't have a good night's sleep. Oh, he's had a busy week at school. So they make excuses rather than going, yeah, it's okay. It's uncomfortable. Or if a player is really struggling, then the parents go, oh yeah, we're just going to take him out. Yeah, it's not for him. We had this week on one of my groups. So a player who had a very traditional way of thinking coach previously. They've been working with us now for 18 months with the old coach as well. And whenever things got difficult and uncomfortable, this player would be really frustrated. They'd throw their racket, they get really upset, really emotional. And what would happen is the coach would go in and rescue. They'd either go in and give them a solution or a way out. They would change the practice, or they would just allow the player to stop. Just stop. Okay, if it's uncomfortable, just stop. Just go sit aside. You can stop. So when things got uncomfortable, the player knew if they reacted in a emotional way, they'll get a way out. And it wasn't the fact that they hated losing. They just didn't like being uncomfortable. And I see it all the time with players now. This week with the same player, that traditional coach has left, that they've gone. But we put him in a situation where he was really uncomfortable. And we've seen a few racket bangs and a little bit of frustration. But me and my fellow coach, we didn't go in and rescue. We just allowed him to be uncomfortable, and it was safe. Like, it's fine. And we've worked with this player over the past few weeks saying, like, it's okay. Learning is uncomfortable. Learning is messy. It's chaotic. You're going to miss, but you're going to find solutions. So last night was a real, I wouldn't say test, but a real big moment, because he was trying to find solutions and failing. I mean, the fellow coach, we just stood back and watched, because we had trust and faith that he would find the solution. And guess what? After a few minutes, he found the solution. And he actually completed the task that he set out to do. And it was quite a challenging task. And that just shows me and my fellow coach both being uncomfortable, because the players obviously stressed, anxious, making loads of errors, getting really upset emotionally. And we just take a step back. We take a step back and allow him to be uncomfortable. But by allowing him to be uncomfortable, and the previous few weeks where we talked about chaos and messy and it being full of errors, he managed to find a way through that. So he's gone from a balanced state of mind to unbalanced or unstable, but then he's got it back to balanced. He did it all himself. He didn't need to be rescued, because he's human. He could find the solution. It was always there. And that was a huge sort of stepping point. And for me, people say, yeah, but what happens if they just don't get it, Steve? What happens if they just don't get it? Well, learning's not linear. Learning's not done in 5-10 minutes. Learning might take 5 weeks, 5 months, 5 years. Learning is completely non-linear. You will never learn in a lesson. Generally, the learning doesn't take place in the lesson. Learning generally takes place in context, in the match. Learning just brings your attention to things you can do. Hopefully, then that will then emerge in a match. So we have to stop seeing lessons as learning lessons. They're not. Tennis lessons are about bringing your attention to certain things. The learning, the development, it emerges in the match. And that's why, again, the basket feeding looks great, because you can look like learning's taking place at a rapid rate. And I always remember one parent, and they went to another coach and had the lesson, technical expert coach, same traditional coach I just talked about, funny enough. And the parent said, oh, we had a lesson with such and such, and they worked on the young player's backhand, and the backhand was fantastic, Steve. It was so good. Like, he got really detailed and told her how to hold the racket and the shape, and we filmed it. It was amazing. It was so good. And I was like, well, great, brilliant, fantastic. That's really good news. You also played a tournament the weekend, didn't you? Yeah. How often did the backhand come out? What do you mean? Like, how often did you see that perfect shape in the backhand? Oh, not a lot. What a waste of time that lesson was then. Because we can make learning and the illusion of learning take place. So that's what the coach did. Isolated it, make it really look like there's lots of learning. But if it doesn't come out in the match, what's the point? Like, I'd rather spend hours being messy and chaotic, and then later on down the line, that coming out in a match, rather than this quick fix, and it just disappears. And the way I say it to players and parents is, it's an investment. Like, we can make a small investment and basket drill, but then the payoff is smaller, and also that money is going to run out quicker. We can make a longer investment over a longer period of time, and it will take a long time for that value to build up, but you're going to have more money and it's going to last you longer. That's what learning is, and that's what constraint-based coaching is, or ecological psychology. Learning's not done in the moment. I'm not creating an illusion. I'm creating something that is going to hopefully transfer into a match situation. And that's tough, because as a coach, I was trained to fix. I was trained to make things better. I was fix it Felix. So when things go wrong, my job is to jump in with my toolbox and my frameworks. I jump in and I fix and I meddle and I change things. My job's not to fix no more. My job's to set problems. So my whole idea is, I'm going to set a problem that is uncomfortable for you. Your job is to find the solution for it. And once you find the solution, guess what? I'm going to set you another problem. I'm going to destabilize you again. And again, that's what learning is. Learning is being destabilized. It's being off balance. It's being uncomfortable. And when you get comfortable, I'm going to make you uncomfortable again. And if you think about a tennis match, that's the whole basic principle of tennis. If I'm playing against you, my job is to make you uncomfortable. I want to stretch you, I want to jam you, I want to make you miss. I want you to feel bad about yourself. So therefore, in practice, I'm going to make you feel those things. I never understand this whole thing of let's rally, or let's rally to 5 and then we'll play the points out. Why? Because I want to make you uncomfortable. So my players now, straight in, let's play. Oh, I need to warm up. No, you're not. You're playing. You're uncomfortable. Let's go. And what I've found is my players are comfortable being uncomfortable now. They understand that discomfort is really important. And that's life. Life, we get discomfort all the time. We're uncomfortable all the time. When we go for a job interview, we're uncomfortable. When we drive to a new place, we're uncomfortable. When we meet new people, we're uncomfortable. Why? Because it's new perception. It's a new environment. We're adapting to what's in front of us. It's uncomfortable. If I drive to a new venue tomorrow, it's going to be uncomfortable because I don't know where I'm going. If I drive to my center tonight, it's comfortable because I do it every day. I know exactly where to go, when to do it, and how to do it. It's a little bit of variability with the cars, but I know what I'm doing. But I'm not uncomfortable. So for me, that's a big thing. And coaching behavior as well. Like I've talked about before on the podcast, but I'll take a step back. I won't get involved. At times, I'm trying to hide on the court. I'm hiding in like doorways and stuff because I want the player to feel like they've got this on their own. But like the player last night, we could have stopped the practice last night when the player was getting uncomfortable. And my fellow coach wanted to stop it. And I'm like, no, don't stop it. Let's just roll with it. Because that's what it is. That's what uncomfortableness feels like. And that's hard because my job is, I'm there to support learning. I'm not there to give information. I'm not there to explicitly tell. I'm there to create the environment that will shape the learning. That's my job. My job is not to directly teach. My job is to shape the learning in and around the teaching. So there we have it. So at this point, I've normally opened up some questions, but this is pre-recorded part 2. And I'm just going to sort of leave with a story that I did talk about on the live stream, to be honest. I'm just going to have a quick sip of my drink. So we have this idea of learning and how learning takes place. And I was having a great conversation with a fellow coach about the serve. I'm not going to name the coach. Coach, in his own words, and he'll know who he is now I'm talking, is in between worlds. He understands and is starting to embrace an ecological psychology, constraint-led approach, way of thinking in his coaching. But he still has the traditional way of coaching as well. And he's trying to, in his words, blend and mix the two. And I said on a podcast last week with John, you can't blend the two. The two contrasting, conflicting methodologies. They don't work well together. One's oil, one's water. So he was talking this week about mixing the two, about the serve. So he'll do the serve in games. Then when he sees it breaking down, he'll put it into isolation and he'll strip it away, and he'll teach explicit model-based coaching of how to serve, and then he'll try and put it back into a game. So he'll put it in, see what goes wrong, take the machine part out, tries to shine it up, and then tries to put it back in. So I get that, because again, that's how people are trained to coach. You do an assessment, you see what goes wrong, you take out the machine part, you polish it up, and you put it back in the machine, and hopefully it transfers. And that's his bias of his education. And I said to him yesterday, to be honest, that's how I used to coach. And even when I transitioned over to constraint-led approach and then ecological psychology, there's still a transition period where I tried to mix the both and then very quickly realized it didn't work. What I said to him was, well, it's a bit like creating this amazing meal and then throwing it in the bin and then starting from scratch and then trying to put it back in with another new meal that doesn't match. We almost have this idea of, well, if I tell you and show you in isolation, you will then process it, and then the output will then hopefully come back later on. And that bias of thinking is still there. Like, the brain doesn't control your movement. Again, if we understand human systems and how the human system works and perception and action, the brain doesn't control movement. The brain doesn't process information the way we believed it did. It plays a part. For me, well, the science shows it regulates everything. It regulates the system, but doesn't control it. The system is a completely coupled system. So when the player serves, they serve based on the information around them, the environment, the task, their own individual constraints. And then the perception and the action is in real time. The coach can try and take that out and give some explicit instructions, but the human body doesn't understand what it is. So the coach may say, well, I need more knee bend. If the task does not demand more knee bend, the body will not follow through. It doesn't need to. Again, the body will respond based on the information it perceives. It acts in that way. It might also act to perceive. So it might hit a serve out, and that will then gather information on how to hit the next one. By stopping the session and explicitly telling the player, you're actually doing no good. If anything, you're doing more harm, because you're bringing awareness to information that's probably irrelevant. So the position of my elbow is irrelevant. The position of my knees is irrelevant. And this has been around since the early 70s with the inner game of tennis. That internal focus, it's not good. It's not healthy. However, that's how coaches are trained. And that bias of learning goes right back to start the podcast with Taylorism. You're more better off just keeping the player of inside the game and manipulating constraints to improve the serve. And I get the bias from coaching, because our educational system gives us a bias. We believe that's the most efficient, effective way. But hopefully you've listened to me rabbit on for 50 minutes. Just challenge it. Challenge the thinking. Just because we've always done something doesn't mean it's right. And I'll steal a quote from Stuart Armstrong from the Talent Equation podcast. For years in medical science, they thought leeches were really good, and they put leeches on the body to get the fever down. That was a big belief back in the day. Science moves on. Research moves on. Tennis moves on. But yet we're still believing in, at this point, stuff that was around from the Industrial Revolution. Cognitive psychology from the 60s, where psychology was based around computer systems because computers came out in the 60s. For me, it's one of the biggest challenges we have in tennis. For me, it's all about, as a coach, I need to understand how the human system learns, how the human system interacts with the world around it. And that's not by explicitly or physically, visually showing it. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the podcast. Apologies if you did watch the live stream this morning. If you're watching the on-demand version, please leave me a comment down below. Check out my From Drills to Skills course if you're interested in how I apply this in real time with real players, with practical examples. The From Drills to Skills course is a great place to start for the price of a private lesson. And I guarantee you'll get more from the course than you would a private lesson with a traditional basket feeding coach. It is focused on coaches as well, but parents, you're more than welcome to pick up that course as well, because if you're working with your son or daughter, then it's really useful. Next week podcast, we're going to look at beginners and why beginners move like robots. And we're going to look at the degrees of freedom. As always, please check out the video on the screen now if you're watching it live, watching a repeat on YouTube. Thanks for listening, and I'll speak to you soon.
Thank you for tuning in to the My Tennis Coaching Podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to subscribe so you never